Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video in the series about Azure Arc. In the previous video, I configured a kind cluster running on my local machine and connected it up to the Azure cloud, making it a connected cluster. Once it was connected, we configured a GitOps policy, so to speak, to configure that server using GitOps technique, and under the hood, Flux is being used to do so. Now today, we're going to take a look at how to do this using Azure Policy on multiple clusters. So let's check out how that works. And let's first look at the two clusters we have. So we still have the same cluster, the kind cluster as yesterday. And as you can see, there's a namespace for Azure Arc, meaning the Azure Arc components have been installed. And I have a second cluster, which is running at DigitalOcean. And if you look at the namespace over there, we also have the Azure Arc namespace. So that's working well. Now, if we look at our Kubernetes clusters, what you can see is that we have two objects here. So in Azure Arm, the fact of connecting the clusters, the kind cluster and the DigitalOcean cluster to Azure results in these two objects here. It looks like a Kubernetes cluster, but it has a different icon somewhat. The type is of Azure Arc. And of course, if we look into the object, we have a limited amount of features here because it's a remote cluster. But of course, you can create, as we did in the previous video, we can create these GitOps configurations. Now, if I have 2 or 5 or 10 or more of these Kubernetes clusters spread across the globe, so to speak, I do not want to add these configurations in the portal. I might not even want to do them using a script or using some kind of pipeline, but you can use a policy to achieve the same result. And as you can see, policies can be applied to these objects. Now, if you look at Azure Policy, if you go to the policy component, policy, of course, is something which can be used for a lot of Azure components, not just Kubernetes clusters. In my case, I only have 2 assignments currently. These are assignments coming from Azure Security Center, but I have nothing else defined. Of course, we need first of all a definition that defines the GitOps configuration policy to apply to our clusters. Now you can look in the list of policies at this point in time, which is the 15th of May 2020. There's not a policy in there which does that kind of configuration. But if you check out the documentation, or if you check out the Git repo that's accompanying this video, you'll find in the policy folder an Arc policy JSON file. And that contains a policy that can be used to apply the GitOps configuration to multiple clusters at a time. We won't go into the details of all these settings here. We will just copy all this data and create a custom policy for it. So we'll create a definition, a new one, which is a policy definition. And this policy definition has to be stored somewhere. I'm storing it, in this case, in a management group. The management group is this one. Select the management group. I give the policy a name. I call it arc-config. I leave the description blank. In this case, I'm going to use an existing category because it's there already. It's called Kubernetes. And I'm going to remove and paste in the custom policy from my Git repo. This policy will also correct or do something in my cluster. So it will need an account or a role to do so. We're going to define this role here, in this case, as contributor. I'm going to save it. And that means that the policy has been defined. Now, the only thing we have to do is to create an assignment. So going to assignment over here. And then we'll do a new policy assignment. So assign policy. And in this case, he's telling me, okay, what's the scope going to be? Well, the scope, let's check it out, what the scope could be. The scope in this case, yeah, this seems to be okay. I'm going to scope it to the resource group. The resource group that contains my Kubernetes clusters or the connected cluster objects. So this is great. No exclusions. The policy definition is going to be the custom definition that we just made. That's the arc config. I'm going to select that custom definition. I'm going to keep the assignment name as arc config as well. We're going to enforce the policy, enable it, and go to the next step. Of course, here we have to do our GitOps configuration, right? So I'm calling this the real-time config, just like in the previous video. The operator instance, I'm going to call it real-time config as well. The namespace will be real-time. We will scope the Flux operator to the namespace. The operator type will be Flux. There is no other one supported today. And as operator parameters, I'm going to just take a look in my commands here. Operator parameters, I'm going to specify this over here, right? So I'm going to copy that and put that in the policy. So operator parameters, it's this one. The repository URL, that should be the following one over here, GitHub repo in gbake/arc. Let's copy that, put it in the repository URL. I'm not going to enable the Helm operator. I'm not going to discuss that for now, and then just click next. That's the configuration I'd like to apply to my clusters. Now, if Azure Policy sees that the configuration has not been applied, we have to apply it, right? So there's a remediation option that you can set. So we create a remediation task to remediate the policy arc config. We're going to use a managed identity, in this case in West Europe. So Europe, West Europe in my case. And the permission is going to be contributor, which was defined in the policy. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to create this policy or the assignment. So this assignment is now created. Yeah, it will appear in the list. I can now go to my clusters. In the clusters, I click on them, click one of the clusters to just check, yeah, is this policy being applied to this this cluster here. So I'm going to policies, and there I'm seeing that there are a couple of policies active. But of course, here it says the evaluation has not started yet. That is normal. There's some kind of a time frame that's used to actually start evaluating if the policy is applied, and then to remediate the policy if that one is not applied. This will take some time, around maybe 15 to 20 minutes somewhat. So I'm going to pause it here, and when it's done, we're going to come back and see what happened. Okay, we're back, and it seems that Azure Policy has been given enough time to make our clusters compliant. The remediation tasks must have run, and after checking for compliance, you can see we have this green check mark over there. Now let's check out the clusters themselves. So I'm going to my, let's say, the DigitalOcean cluster, and at the policies level, there you can also see that the policy has been applied. It's now scoped to this cluster only, and we can see that the cluster is compliant 100%, 1 out of 1, which is great. That also must mean that the configuration has been applied here, and indeed we see that the real-time config has been applied. The same must be the case for, or is hopefully the case, on our other cluster. Indeed, the policy clearly states that the resource is fully compliant, 100%, and the configuration has been applied. The real-time config is available here as well. Now, of course, for everything to work properly, we know that Flux works with a SSH key. So if we click on the config and you check out the SSH key over here, you'll see it listed. On the other cluster, the DigitalOcean cluster, there will be a separate SSH key listed. Naturally, you have to make sure that these are configured as deploy keys on your Git repo. Not going to show how that is done. You have seen that in the previous video as well. But once that is finished, the GitOps policy can take full effect, and everything what you deployed or everything that you specified in your Git repo as YAML files, in this case in the config folder, will be applied to the clusters as well. So that's it. You have seen how to use Azure Policy with a custom policy that we defined to apply GitOps configurations to our connected clusters that were connected using the Azure Arc solution. I hope you enjoy that. See you some other time. Bye bye.